Alright, so first one, the read button. I'm gonna start on top. Just see. Okay, now I should back again. Alright. Right, so we create our array. The question that say that it's going to be maximum 50 numbers, and we said we're working with whole numbers. So what we need to do is create our array that can hold 50 whole numbers, and then have a counter. We can just keep track of how many numbers is in the array. So this is step 1. Then step 2, in our read button. We want to read from a text file. That means we need our text file txt, and this I we created for display purposes. Alright, then what you do? Firstly, we assign tf to num.txt. Remember the purpose of this one? Our text file is on this num.txt, is on the storage device. So what we're doing, we're basically taking it from the storage and we're just putting it into memory, into a variable called tf. So tf has got this, to say digital, I want to say digital version, even though it's the wrong word, but it's like the memory version of, alright, it's the memory version of that. Then you need it now, you've got your 3 options. Remember, either reset tf to read from it, or we've got append, or we've got rewrite. That will be for writing to it. So at this stage we're reading, so we reset. That's fine. We want to put it in the array, so our queue should start at 0. We don't know how many lines there are, so we repeat until we at the end of the file tf. And then what we want to do the whole time is we want to read out of tf and put it into our array at position q. So it's going to put it into position 0. And then we're going to increment q. So q is 0, we put it in position 0, q becomes 1. We check, are we at the end? If it's not, we put it the next one into array number at position 1, we make it 2, we check if we enter the file. And that carries on. When we're done, we remember q is actually 1 too many. So we have to just decrement q to move it back to where it was. Then we've got all the numbers in there, so we just want to display. So array display.lines were clear. Our for loop needs to start at 0 though, and we go to q, and we begin our array display.lines, our into string array num I, and then that is our display. So this is our display. It's nice. I like putting that comment in so that you know this piece. You will see later on why we want to do that. But yes, for now, that is our display section. And that was our read. Any questions on the read? But I like some wrong answers, so let's look. So add one random number to the array. So adding a random number, what the code we've got here is this. So we've created these variables. So my ran variable got the random number. We want the random number between 50 and 150. So that was my random line, and then I displayed this. And when we played this, it looked perfect. But what is wrong? Who can help me? What went wrong here? Yes, the problem is we created a local variable ran. We just gave it to the local variable and displayed the local variable. So it was never actually added to the array. The array is still empty. So theoretically, and I want to advise you, try not to create a variable here, because it will prevent you from doing this. A lot of people do this, and then it runs fine, and then you think it's fine, and when you sort, the number's gone, and you don't know why it happened. And then the reason is because it was never added to our array. So this part here needs to be our array. Kyk, pak ons nou net. Dis reg. Yes. Alright, so if I do this, is this correct, or who wants to give me some alternatives? Yes. So the problem with I also is just a local variable. So we don't want that. So I want to suggest when you do your add button, try to remember to not to create any variables. That will prevent you from using these ones incorrectly. The problem with I here, I was just a variable. So using I here doesn't actually help because now you're putting it somewhere in the array, but firstly you don't know where, and then because you don't know where you're putting it, it will just be in the wrong place. It's sort of like if you wash the dishes at home and you just give a random person, please put away the dishes in a rush. Then they're just going to put it in any random cupboard and you won't find your dishes again. So best option is Q. Remember Q told us where we are in the array. So we do need to put Q, and then Pavan did say we need to increment Q. So now we just need to think, I'm going to put it into rnum_q, the random number, and then I'm going to display it. So this is perfect, but we are adding one, so I need to increment Q. So do you think we need to increment it before or after? Yes, perfect. Perfect. We want to increment Q before because we want to make the open space and then put the new number into that space and then display the number in that space. So that would be perfect. Yes, doctor. So it depends. Remember what we did was in our read button. Where is the read button? Remember what we did is we decremented Q. Because of this one, we actually removed the open space. So if you didn't do this, if you didn't decrement Q, then all our displays, you needed to have a -1 the whole time. And if you do that, then you could have, then it had the open space. But because we decrement Q, so we're actually moving Q back to where it's supposed to be, and then it's not in the open space. And for that reason, we need to increment Q first to go to that open space. Yeah, 100%. Yes. All right. So let's quickly see. So I agree what you're saying. Let's just quickly follow what we're happening here. Let's say we've got our rnum here. Rnum, and then right there. Let's just do this. So that's our array we created. Then we've got our Q, which is there. And yes. All right. Let's say the numbers in our text file are these numbers. Oh, yeah, I remember now. I was. All right, can all of you see this text file now? The Excel. All right, perfect. Alright, so let's say that's our text file, what we've got, so let's make it another color. So that's the text file files, numbers in the text file. So what we do, we say Q is 0. So Q gets a value of 0. Then we read the line. So we read the line, so 4 gets placed into rnum at position 0. Then we increment Q, so Q goes to 1. And now I check, am I at the end of the text file? No, I'm not. So I go up, I read the next one, which is a 2. I put it into Q position. So I read the 2, it goes into Q position. And then my Q goes, increments Q. So it goes 2. Then I check, am I at the end? Now I'm not. So then I get 4. So 4 gets placed into position 2. And then I increment Q. So Q is 3. Now I check, am I at the end? No, I'm not. It's a 6. So 6 gets placed into position 3. And then I increment Q. So Q becomes 4. And I check, am I at the end? No, I'm not. So now I take the 3, put it in position 4, and I increment Q. So Q goes to 5. And now I check, am I at the end? And then the answer is yes. So after this line, can you see Q is 5, but my numbers is 0 to 4. So 5 is the first open space. So now what I do is I decrement Q. So now my Q goes to 4 again. So now 4 is the position of the last one. So now our problem is when we add 1, I can't put it into position 4 because 4's got the last number. So I need to increment Q first so that Q can become 5. Then in rnum 5, if that's my random number, then in rnum 5 I can put that random number and display it. So now Q is 5 and those are the numbers I've got. Go on. Alright, our next one, display even numbers. Nice thing about when you're reading from a line, you'll see like this one, we're reading integers. And we can actually, by reading line, we can put it immediately in there. So we didn't need any type of conversion. We didn't need any into strings or string to ints or any of that. So that's the nice thing about the read line. If it's doubles, integers, or strings, reading does it for you already. So that's a nice thing. But yes, yeah, so you read out of this thing and you're putting it into that one. So our next one, display even numbers. So in this case, we want to go through the array and only look for even numbers to display. So what we did there is we created our variable I because we knew, you ask yourself, do I need to go through the whole array? And then the answer is yes, because I need to check each number to see if they're even or not. So then you can clear your text file, you make your for loop to go from 0 to Q, and then we begin. And then if our array at position I divided by 2 has got no remainder, it means it's an even number. So then we can display that number. And then we just end. Right, and that's our even one. Alright people, then because of load shedding and everything in our time, I see it's 10 past 6. What I want to jump in, I'm going to stop the marking right now. I'm going to stop here, so these ones we'll have a look at a little bit later. I want to jump to the save for now. Let's see if we can do the save button. So what we want to do with the save is we want to basically write all the numbers in the array to the text file. Alright, let's quickly go to our read again. Remember with this one, here we want to read the information from the text file and put it into our array. So we assigned, we reset, we did all these things, and then one thing that was forgotten here is, let's quickly recap what this does. Assign file, it links TF to that one, to that text file. And then we open the text file for reading. So then we read through it. But at this stage, even if you reach the end of the text file is still open for reading. So what we must remember is we have to go close file, TF. This is very important. Initially, like what we've done so far, you'll tell me, but sir, this doesn't matter. I didn't close mine and my program worked fine. Which is okay. I'll show you just now what happens if we don't close it. So because now what we want to do is, with this button, I want to save all the numbers back to the text file called, was it num.txt? Yeah. Alright, so what I want to do now is I want to save it back to num.txt. So remember now with our array of numbers, we read it, but then we added some numbers and we removed some numbers and we added a number to all of them. We sorted them a bit. So we worked with this array of numbers and added and removed and shuffled and did all different things. Now, the numbers I've got currently, those are the ones I actually want in my text file. All right, so first question you ask yourself, do I need to work with a text file? And the answer is yes. At this stage, I want to save it back to the text file. That means I need my TF of type text file. So you need that variable. Your next question you ask yourself, do I need to go through the whole array? And then the answer is yes. I want to save all the numbers in the array. So that means I'm going to need a for loop. So I create my I for integer, and I know I'm going to have a for loop here. All right. Now to go back to the text file, as soon as we know we're going to need a text file, we can also go, we created this variable, and now we need to link it with our text file itself. So we need to assign file, our TF, to our num.txt. All right, so the question, can we move this variable creation on top? And I think TF could work. I wouldn't though, because even though it sounds like we're doing it a lot, we're not actually. It's only in 2 buttons. So only use it twice. The integer one, you could have also thought, because I mean the I for integer for a for loop, that one we actually use a lot more. But that's also not ideal. I can't remember if it's Delphi or Java, but one of the 2 languages, they don't actually want your for loop variable up there as a global variable. Yes, and then it's just like not happy at all. So yeah, so with these 2, I wouldn't. Generally, your question would be, if to decide, do I need to put it as a global variable or not, is the values that I'm going to put in that variable, do I need to use those values in other buttons or in other methods? If you're going to need these values in other methods, then do it. So in this case, the array and the number of elements in the array, we need that so we need the data from this one to move to this one, to move to this one, to move to this one. So that's why they're there. Our for loop variable I, we don't. The value is here. Where it ended is not going to influence this one, because it's just going to start over again. And that value does not influence this one, because this one will just start over again. So that's why the I shouldn't be there. Our text file though, we do in this case, we use the same text file, but it doesn't necessarily always going to be the same. You'll see actually in tests, what we'll do is you'll read from one and you'll save to another one. In a test, we theoretically should ask you to save it to another text file. Because the problem with using the same one is if you mess this one up, then all your data is gone. So if you write and you clear everything, and now suddenly you want to read again, now you can't read because now the text file is empty. So you messed up all of your data files. So that's why in tests and exams, we try not to use the same one. In exercises, I use the same one, and because when we get to like projects, you do want to have the same one. You want to, when you read from one and make changes and save it, when you open the program again, you want to carry on with what you had. So we want to do this, and I mean, if we lose the data files, we can just download it again. It's just in tests, it's a little bit irritating if you have to go and look for the files again. So generally, assign file after TF variable differs from button to button. So again, so it's not a transfer of data, that something that happened in the one that you would want to transfer to the other one. And for that reason. All right. All right. So what I do want to say, so think of these questions that we ask. If you're going to use a text file, create your text file variable, assign it, and I want to say when you're done at the end of the button, maybe immediately say close file TF. With your read button, I can tell you now, I forget it like regularly. And the only times I do remember it is as soon as I do the assign file, I put my close file at the end, and then you can forget about it because it's already there. So I want to suggest, as soon as you know you're going to work with a text file, put your text file variable, assign it, and close it. And then put everything in between. Then you know that part is sorted. As I said, second question, ask yourself, do I need to do it with all the numbers in the array? If the answer is yes, it means for loop, it means I variable. All right, once we're there, after we assigned, now we've got three options to choose from. Remember, it's reset for reading, or it's append to add, or it's rewrite to basically recreate or clear and write. So both of these two could be used to save. However, this one just adds on to the text file, while this one recreates the text file. So the text file actually gets cleared with whatever was in there. It's not there anymore. Generally, we most of the time use rewrite. Because the case we've got now, remember my array of numbers. We added and removed and sorted and added one to all of them. So the numbers themselves, all of them changed. And I don't want to add it to the text file because then it's basically going to double the numbers. That's not what I want. I want to replace the numbers that's there. And for that reason, I'm going to use rewrite. So then I just say rewrite my TF. This will tell me go create this or recreate this text file for me. And by doing so, it actually clears it, and then we're there. Then we had our for loop because we want to do it with all the array. And what do we want to do? We want to write ln. So write line to our TF. What do you want to write to TF? My rnum I. So if you can see, this is very similar. So when I write, I use write line, and when we did our read, we did the read line. Read line out of TF, put it into rnum, and what our save does, we write line to TF this numbers. Re-enter the marks. So the purpose of the text file is to save the data so that every time we open the program, we can carry on with the same numbers and work with it. And we can save and then close. And the next time we open it, if we read again, we carry on where we left off the previous time. While if we didn't have text files, we worked with the memory numbers. And remember, if you can remember like our programs, it was always just like new random numbers or ask the user for new names. So the user always had to type in stuff or generate random numbers, but we couldn't work with the same numbers over and over. And that's what a text file does for us. So it stores the data for us so that we can reuse it later. And all right. So as you said, with a read, then we do reset. It opens the text file for reading, and then we read line out of TF and put it in rnum-i. Now what we do is we still assign file, but then we say rewrite, which will clear the text file and create it for me, TF, and then I write that to it. So now if you save this, generally you won't have a display here, except if you wanted to maybe just put a message here to say all the information is stored in the text file or something like that. But generally you won't have. So we can just play our program. Let's see what it does. So if I read, there's my numbers. I can add a random number, So I've got those numbers. Now if I click save and I close this and I click play again and I read again, there's my two past numbers. So that is our benefit of this. If I go and I add another random and another one and another one, once I click save and I close it and I click play and I read, now suddenly I've got all of those numbers I had. So as soon as you click save, it saves all your numbers onto the hard drive. Previously, we only worked in memory like this. If I click add these numbers from the 108 down, so I click add it, but I'm not going to click save. So I'm not putting it on the hard drive. And I close it. If I click play, click read, you'll see they're not there. The 108 and all the numbers underneath 108 are not there. Because I didn't click save. It didn't take the numbers in the array and put it onto the hard drive. And that's literally text files. Nothing more, nothing less than this.